Welcome to the Leadership Buzz with Lloyd Buzz Buzzell, an International Coaching Federation credentialed coach, DISC practitioner, and retired Air Force colonel. During a military career spanning nearly 4 decades, 37 years of service, Buzz rose from enlisted airman to colonel, spending much of that time in nuclear operations, from missile alert duty to strategic command and control. Those experiences taught him that trust, discipline, relationships, and values are not abstract leadership ideas. They shape how people perform when the mission matters. Now, Buzz brings those lessons into conversations for leaders who want to grow in self-awareness and better align their behavior with their values. Each episode features one book, one idea, one story, and 3 coaching questions to help you reflect on your leadership. Work hard, tell the truth. Here's Buzz.
Thanks, TJ. So for much of my career, my leadership was tied to the role I held. I was an officer, commander, and eventually a colonel. Those roles came with clear responsibilities and expectations. But that title can tell people what authority you have, but it can't tell them who you really are. That became especially important when leadership gets hard and difficult, when the pressure rises, or when what the organization wants conflicts with what you really believe. So in those moments, you cannot lead from a job description. You have to lead from something deeper. So since retiring from the Air Force, I've spent a lot of time thinking about that. That means who I am when that uniform's gone, and what are the still values that still guide me? What is my why? And how do I make sure the way I lead matches the person I believe I am? That is where this week's book begins. TJ, tell us about True North by Bill George.
Today's book is True North: Discover Your Authentic Leadership by Bill George. George argues that authentic leadership begins with understanding your own life story, the experiences, values, motivations, and relationships that have shaped who you are. Rather than trying to imitate someone else's leadership style, he challenges leaders to develop an internal compass that can guide their decisions, especially when values are tested. The book invites us to look inward before attempting to lead outward. Buzz, let's talk about what it means to find and follow your true north.
So let's talk a little about that true north. I think we learn our true north very early in our lives, and I know I learned it from my parents, that work hard was the key to getting ahead for me. And I think often we say we learn what not to do from bad leaders as we move along. So there's some truth in that, but I think you learn much more from the great leaders you encountered. I think your parents planted those values in you, and I know my Air Force leaders helped you recognize how those values should appear in my leadership. The true north didn't come from one event. It was developed through people and experiences. I think if I had to sum it up, my parents really planted my true north, but some remarkable leaders in the Air Force helped me recognize it, strengthen it, and learn how to live it. I think that's really important to make a mark, because I see just a lot of, hey, I learned everything from bad leaders. Well, that just can't be. You can't see a bad leader and then just do the opposite all the time. I think there's a lot of strength in our great leaders, and I wanted to highlight a couple here today. Now, with that said, my very first supervisor, she had a really tough time. She yelled when things were going wrong, and she struggled to answer questions specifically about the job. Like I went to her to ask, hey, how do we do this? How do we do that? I was just out of tech school in the United States Air Force from Keesler Air Force Base, and she had a hard time just to tell me how things were. She really did not know her job as well as she should. And she had been a cross-trained individual. She had come from another job, and then she had been overseas, and she had experienced a lot of personal difficulties. And those difficulties slipped in and affected her professional leadership and her job. And really under pressure, she became really visibly tense and was just really unsettled all the time. And it was really tough to get a hold on me developing as an airman because of how she was as a leader. And I tried really hard, and I know she was really struggling in some very basic standards that also became slipping. She was a single parent dealing with some very significant personal challenges. So I'm not judging circumstances here, but I am describing what it felt like to work for a leader whose pressure spilled into others. The takeaway for me was that experience taught me that leaders bring their whole selves into that workplace. If we can't manage ourselves under pressure and things at home, that pressure eventually lands on the people we lead. And that's a lot of what happens in the Air Force. We need to make sure things are good at home because if it's not good at home, it's not going to be good at work. And she showed me some things I did not want to repeat, but it was the great leaders during that time frame who really shaped the leader I wanted to become. Now, my professional military education started early in my career as an airman, and I had two great men that were my PME instructors, professional military education, Master Sergeant Martin and Tech Sergeant Tierney. They were awesome. They were great. I had a great session with them. They were my Airman Leadership School PME instructors. They modeled professionalism and they encouraged you like a lot. So I did this assignment that was not graded. It had nothing to do with anything. It was an extra type of effort that they had given us to say, hey, work on this, turn it in, and we'll give you a little feedback. But it really was really ungraded. Well, I worked pretty hard on it, and Master Sergeant Martin wrote me a note back to tell me, hey, when people perform when they're not being graded or watched, reveals their character. Wow. That stayed with me, and I kept that piece of paper and note for a very, very long time. And that stayed with me when I returned back to my regular job, and it reflected back when I had to do the same type things. That meant a lot to me, and I remembered Sergeant Martin, and I would sometimes just call him and ask him some questions, and he would really take his time with me. You look at, was my effort dependent on my recognition? No. Did it maintain the same standard when nobody was inspecting or watching me? Then also, just routine responsibilities were still worthy of my best effort. Just because it didn't make me a better or more ranking or gave me more money in my job, those were still my best effort that I had to give. And that means a lot in the Air Force is service before self and excellence in all we do. So my parents had already taught me to work hard, but that note helped me understand that hard work was more than a way to get ahead. It was a reflection of my character. So there was that another leader taught me something really important. Leadership was not only about maintaining standards, it was really about seeing people. Now, just after I was assigned to the Air Force Base there in New Hampshire, Pease Air Force Base, I was a pretty new airman. And I had to do some really kind of routine tasks. I had to go down and drop some things off near the front office and had to make some copies. I was just a new airman, and I was down there visiting the administrative office. Not a big deal. But the chief master sergeant saw me, and he came over to talk to me. Now, that's an E9 in the United States Air Force, and it's one of the highest ranks, and not very many people attain this. And he was also one of the most senior people on base. So he'd been in like 28, 29 years, came in like the mid 1960s. Pretty incredible at the time. So a lot of our folks that were senior at that time had been with Viet at least once, if not 2 or 3 times. So when he came over to see me, and believe me, I didn't want my name known. I didn't want to have anybody know who I was, just stay under the radar. But he had come over and he asked me how my family was handling the transition into military life. He knew my wife's first name, he knew my son's first name and age, and just asked how things were going. No boss at any previous job, before I came in the Air Force, had taken any interest in my family. I was dumbfounded. This very important guy that was taking care of everything else that he had to do in his life and at his job and had all these people working for him really came down and just spoke to me as a person and asked me about my family. That really had a profound impact on me. He was one of the highest ranking enlisted people in the building and the base, and he had taken the time to learn about a brand new airman and his family. He had no way to know that he would just run into me, but he'd actually reviewed my record and told me he was happy and glad that I was there working with our team. That day, I really felt seen. And I think my takeaway from that was, I don't remember exactly everything he said, but I do remember he made me feel really, really good and really like I was being seen. He taught me that leadership is not only about noticing someone's performance, it's noticing the person. So I got a coaching question here for you early on here. What does it mean to you to feel truly seen by a leader? Can you remember a time when someone made you feel that way? I think feeling seen can change how we see ourselves. But I think the best leaders go a step further. They help us see possibilities in ourselves that we cannot yet see. So, my first NCOIC, my non-commissioned officer in charge, he started putting me in for all these Airman of the Month boards, Airman of the Quarter boards. And what these boards were, you had to report in to a group of people, 3 to 5 senior leaders, usually early in the morning. You had to dress in your service dress, so you had to be in perfect military appearance order. And then you had to answer a bunch of questions. These questions surrounded things like military leadership, who was in charge. You had to be able to name leaders. You had to be able to know current events. You had to know about military things that were associated with your job. There was a lot of things to be able to keep in mind. I studied a lot for those, and they were putting me in almost every month. And every board required really a lot of preparation to be able to get there. I mean, just think about it. Like, they're asking me about current events, military history, the chain of command. You really had to practice speaking clearly and then really being managed how nervous you are. And I just always had to have my uniform sharp and make sure it was clean and really inspect it. And then my NCOIC, he would continually push me to study, and he'd call me in and look in my uniform and inspect me before the boards just to make sure I was good to go. Eventually, after all these boards, I mean, I was kind of getting tired of meeting the boards. He sat me down and explained why he kept doing it. He was preparing me to compete for the promotion for below the zone. So you get promoted early to this particular rank, the next rank up. As soon as I met a certain time frame, I'd go up for a really larger board and harder board, and there'd be other people competing against me. And when you went up for that, you would be promoted ahead of time. So he told me that because I'd been going off the boards and had practiced so much, and he had been pushing me so much, that I would easily beat out at least 80 to 90% of the competition right off the bat. So that promotion meant more rank and more money. And it made you eligible to test for the next rank earlier, which would give you even more money quicker. On top of that, my college tuition assistance would rise from 75% and 90% if I got promoted early. Okay, you may not think that's a big deal, but that additional 15% was pretty significant for me and my wife. So when the final board met, it was super easy for me and much easier than I expected. Matter of fact, the officer on the board that chaired it actually ended up calling my non-commissioned officer in charge, my NCOIC, afterwards, and just how impressed he was and how well I'd done. And I did get promoted below the zone. It was a big deal, and it made me feel really, really well. My NCOIC saw an opportunity for me before I understood what it could mean. He didn't simply tell me I had potential. He just invested his time, a significant amount of his time. He held me to a standard and then prepared me to act when the opportunity came up. So I think uplifting someone doesn't always mean making things easier for them. Sometimes it just means challenging them, preparing them, and just refusing to let them settle for less than what you believe that they can become. So here's another coaching question for you. What does uplifting another person look like to you? Who saw something in you that you could not yet see yourself? So my parents gave me the foundation of work hard, tell the truth, keep pushing even when success does not happen immediately. But Tech Sergeant Martin, Tech Sergeant Tierney taught me character is revealed when no one's watching. The chief taught me to see the person, not just the rank. And my NCOIC taught me to prepare people for opportunities that they may not see. Even that first supervisor taught me that leaders must manage themselves under pressure. Hey, that true north piece, those experiences helped me center my true north, work hard, tell the truth, see people and help them grow. And work hard, tell the truth remains the center, and seeing people and helping them grow is how I try to live as a leader. This is how I develop that. So, your final coaching question is, if you were asked to tell one story that reveals your true north, What story would you tell, and why does it say about who you are? And just really one final thought. The best leaders did not give me my true north. My parents had already planted it, but those leaders recognized it, strengthened it, showed me how to live it while helping others discover their own. Your title may not give you authority, but your true north determines how you use it.
Bill George's True North reminds us that authentic leadership begins with knowing who we are. Our experiences, values, and relationships shape the internal compass that guides us when leadership becomes difficult. Finding our true north means understanding what grounds us and having the courage to lead from that place. So ask yourself, am I leading from who I truly am or from who others expect me to be? Buzz, over to you.
Thanks for listening to the Leadership Buzz. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe so you don't miss future conversations. And if you have a moment, leave a rating or review. That helps other leaders discover the show. If these kinds of leadership questions resonate with you and you'd like to explore them more deeply, feel free to reach out to me. Coaching conversations often start exactly this way. Until next time, work hard, tell the truth.